Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Promise of Mentorship for Women. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. My name is Matt Kelly, Business Development Manager here at PeopleGrove. Really excited to have the chance to present to you all today with our May webinar. I'd like to just start off with a few reminders. First of all, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording can be made available to you post-webinar. So our team is happy to follow up with anyone interested with that recording. So please look for emails from us following today's webinar and share your interest in receiving the recording. Second, questions are very welcome and very encouraged. You can use the questions box on the GoToWebinar control panel there to type in any questions you may have. Hopefully we'll all have the chance to get to every question here today. We're going to leave some time at the end, roughly about 5 to 10 minutes for some open Q&A, but we really encourage those questions throughout the presentation so we can kind of cover them as we proceed. Lastly, if you're having any technical difficulties, please type those in the question box as well. We'll try to manage those as best we can. So to kick things off here, I'd like just to take the time to introduce today's presenters. We have AJ Aronstein and Valenza Shin from Barnard College. As I said, my name is Matt Kelly. I recently joined PeopleGrove just about 6 months ago from Georgetown University, where I was the Associate Director of Alumni Career Services, managing the alumni to alumni as well as student to alumni networking platform that we call Hoya Gateway, and using the PeopleGrove tool to do so. I'm going to let AJ and Christine introduce themselves here today.
Do you want to go first? Hi, everyone. My name is AJ Aronstein. Again, I'm Associate Dean for a relatively new initiative. It's 16 months old here at Barnard College called Beyond Barnard, and we'll talk about that initiative in just a little bit. Prior to being here, after a quick year-long stint at the New School for Social Research here in New York City, I spent 7 years at the University of Chicago, where my job was to build advising and programming resources for postdocs and graduate students across doctoral and master's programs. And we're looking forward to talking to you today about what we've been doing at Beyond Barnard since its launch, especially around mentoring programs.
Hi, I'm Valenza Shin, and I'm the Senior Associate Director for our advising and programming team here at Barnard. And prior to that, I was primarily doing the alumni advising in what was the Office of Career Development here since about 2012. And I started out my career as a New York City public school teacher and worked in teaching and teacher education before making a shift over to career advising later on.
I was actually a middle school teacher myself, Christine, so it all stays in the education family here.
Yeah, absolutely. And nothing's harder than that. So
middle school, not a time I want to get back
to. Well, real quickly, I'd like just a quick overview of what we're planning on covering today. For those of you that might have been able to join our March and April webinars, we've been covering the alumni career services need. This is a kind of a developing thing we've seen in the research around alumni returning to their alma mater for career support. So we'll kind of recap a little bit of that research in the first portion of our presentation today. I would encourage all those who are interested in learning more to see our March and April webinar recordings, which are currently public on our YouTube channel. Next, we'll kind of talk about women in higher education and then women in the workplace, talk about some of the initiatives that are happening in both of those areas. And then we'll turn it over to AJ and Christine to cover Beyond Barnard and talk about how these initiatives around mentoring are really making an impact on their campus. And of course, cover your questions towards the end of the presentation today. So before we kick things off, I'd like to just get a quick poll of the audience. How effectively do you feel that women's specific needs are being met on your campus? I'm going to launch the poll here. You can see we're going 1 to 5 here, from 1 being poorly to 5 being exceptionally, and we'll go for about 45 seconds here, leaving this poll open. Got about 65% of the vote in, so I'll leave it open for probably another 10 seconds here. Great. So as I close the poll here, we're going to see that and share these results. We'll see that it's a little bit of a mix, but mostly it's 3s and 4s. So leaning towards higher on the average there towards exceptionally. So that's good to see here in terms of the results. This first part of the presentation will kind of recap what we've been covering with our webinar series here at PeopleGrove around the alumni career services need, specifically around what 21st century alumni look like. Now, of course, these 21st century alumni are also 21st century students. So as students are coming to campus in more diverse droves, more diverse groups, we're seeing that their shift in how these alumni look and then how they're served reflects the diversity of students coming onto campus. So 3 areas of focus that we've kind of narrowed in here in PeopleGrove have been post-traditional students. Then we've looked at some of the job switching trends amongst millennials specifically, and then a need for reskilling. Those are the fact that jobs are being created in 5 to 10 years. Most of the folks who are in some of these jobs, like software engineers, data scientists, these jobs didn't exist even 5 or 10 years ago, and so the need for reskilling is pretty crucial here. In terms of post-traditional students, that's really defined as students who are above the age of 25. They might be financially independent, even working a job while they're getting their undergraduate degree. Additionally, they might be military affiliated. And these actually make up more than half of all undergraduate students in a 2011-2012 survey. AJ, Christine, is this kind of reflecting some of the things you're seeing on your campus?
So I think, and Matt, just really quickly, I think, can you share the slides back because we still have the poll on our screen?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Somehow my screen is showing the slides, but not everybody else. Let me try this again.
In general, I would say that we know nationally what's interesting is that what we think of as a traditional student doesn't even make up 50% of the total population of undergraduates in the United States. Certainly at Barnard, we are a residential college campus, so the bulk of our advising is done with students who are living here full-time in their 4 years. We have very few students who are kind of outside of what we call the traditional age. However, I think one thing that we would say is that about 20% of our advising out of Beyond Barnard around careers and career development is with alumni, and a lot of that is done by Christine. And can you say something about job switching and the importance of maybe maternity leave in the work that you've done with advising alumni?
Yeah, I mean, I think we tend to see alumni when they are making some sort of transition. And so sometimes that's as simple as making a transition to a new job, but often it is thinking about a shift or a complete change of field, and often it's making a transition out of having been perhaps home full-time or part-time with children or elderly parents, or we'll even see people who are heading for an early retirement and want to talk about other options. So a lot of variety there.
Yeah, so we think that it's in order to support and advance the careers of women specifically, we really need to be attentive to these inflection points in the careers of women that attend to them in very specific ways, particularly around family planning and returning to the workforce, but also career transitions at all stages in their lifespan.
Great. So what we're seeing across our partner campuses here at PeopleGrove especially is that some of these old models around how serving students and alumni need a little bit of a paradigm shift. So during school, students often really just had one-time job placement. And career centers were mostly focused on getting those students into those placements, those entry-level jobs, and then those jobs eventually would lead to careers for students. Now during school, we're seeing that career education needs to provide a hands-on experience to an increasingly diverse student population. Entry-level jobs are not so entry-level anymore. There was actually an article in the Wall Street Journal just this week about how a lot of students applying for these entry-level jobs need to have 2, 3, sometimes even 4 internships or part-time jobs, and give them some level of experience before applying for careers right after graduation. Post-graduation, the old model said, let's just create some social networking events for some social connections to keep alumni engaged with the community, keep them a part and within our grasp as an alumni association or even an advancement office. Now we're seeing with these needs of alumni, particularly the reskilling, I think the returning to the workforce after, say, maternity leave, as Christine shared, is a crucial aspect of this. And that's going to require some learning opportunities to be on demand for these types of switches, these types of reskilling as people progress. Lastly, to kind of cover our recap of our previous 2 webinars, we also want to think about if there's a cost to not being able to meet these types of needs, especially amongst alumni. And as you've seen from the alumni perspective, those alumni who answered positively that college is worth the cost is starting to drop precipitously in various surveys across the country. So we really want to think about, are there even ancillary consequences to not being able to meet our students and our alumni where they are specifically. Now we're going to jump into some more focused research here on women's issues within higher education and then within the workplace. So what we found, and very interestingly, is that women are now outpacing their male counterparts in terms of their presence on campuses across the United States. So you can see that 56% of women, this is a study from the Atlantic in 2017, 56% of all women are on campuses across country. So they are clearly outpacing, and they're now more than half of the population on these college campuses. Additionally, women are more likely than men to have earned a bachelor's degree by the age of 29 than their male counterparts are. I know that at Barnard it is 100% women, but AJ, Christine, is there anything you'd like to add here about some of the things you've seen maybe from your partner schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think that these numbers have been growing for a while, and I think that one of the statistics that Barnard is very proud of, and I think other women's colleges make this argument, is that the success of our students in applying to and being accepted at graduate school is higher than average for a more typical co-ed campus. So I know that that's one area where it's relatively easy to measure the impact that an all-women's education can have.
At the same time, I think one of the trends that we see is, and I'd be curious to hear from our friends on the line as well, we see our medical school applicant age on average increasing. And so the importance of staying connected to the university while students are thinking about applying to medical school and then actually going through the process, that's become more crucial as our average age of applicant to medical school has crept up towards about 25, 26. And what Christine said is exactly right. We found that our students have a lot of success applying to doctoral programs, especially in the sciences, more and more. And that age of application is also increasing as students tend to take some time between undergraduate and their first applications to doctoral programs to get the kind of research experience that supplements their undergraduate work that's necessary for success.
Great. Switching over to issues with women in the workforce, as the percentage of women increases on college campuses, that has not necessarily translated into the workplace. This is research that is probably pretty familiar to those of you on the line here. The fact that women only make up 47% of the workforce, while they're earning college degrees at a higher rate, that hasn't translated into the workplace itself. And then, of course, the gender pay gap. This is an interesting piece here from Bloomberg in 2018 around how the gender pay gap really manifests itself, not just for women overall, but also by race. And so, the issues that we're facing here is that, as women are increasingly a larger presence on college campuses, the translation to the workplace and how that transition takes place can be a very big challenge. AJ, Christine, I know there's been some research on your campus around this gender pay gap. Would you share that?
Yeah, so Provost Linda Bell, who's a labor economist by training here, she's been at Barnard for several years now. Her research actually suggests that in organizations where the chair of the board and the chief executive officer are either the same woman or are both women, the pay gap entirely disappears. So women's leadership at the top of organizations really matters. We'll talk about that in one of our programs called the Schvidler Fellow Programs, which is one of the mentoring opportunities that we've cultivated in the last few years here. But it really demonstrates the importance of having women at the top of organizations to make sure that pay is equitable across the entire firm or organization.
Yeah, and that actually perfectly transitions into our next kind of piece of research here around how women's success is everyone's success. So when we think about women in leadership positions, is there kind of an imperative here to make sure that women are being hired in these positions, not just a social justice perspective, but also from a business perspective? If women are on an executive team for startups in an entrepreneurial setting, they're more likely to have a higher valuation at their Series A fundraising round than those that don't have women in leadership positions. Additionally, when you look at some of the larger cap companies, 26% is the percentage of large cap companies with at least one woman on the board, and those companies outperform those without women on the board by that 26% margin. So it's really significant to have women in these leadership positions, because not only does the company do better, but it's also that social justice imperative that we spoke about earlier. One of the interesting points that we found in our research, and there's a white paper that has just been released by PeopleGrove, written by our own Anna Wessendorf, around some of this research, is that there are more S&P 1500 companies run by men named John than there are run by women. So really, there's an imperative here to get women into these leadership positions for the purposes of success and having business success as well. And this is not just research that is kind of being published in academic journals or published amongst higher education institutions, but we're also finding it starting to enter the zeitgeist a little bit here and entering into the social conscious. So this is an ad that actually AJ pointed out to me that L'Oreal is doing around getting women into leadership positions. Yes, it's obviously being used to sell product, but it's also interesting that they're really focusing on some of these data points here around women in leadership positions and how those companies are outperforming their peers. AJ, Christine, anything you'd like to add in that sense?
Well, I know for a number of years there's been talk about that magic 30%, that when the percentage of women on board reach 30%, that's where some real change can take place as well. And I know for a while there was some, very concerted effort, especially in the nonprofit sector, to try and achieve that.
Mm-hmm. I think I would add just to this, part of what we're trying to do at Barnard is really make sure that our students, our undergraduates, know that women belong in leadership conversations from day one. So it's really important for us as we think about how we scale up career support for women across the entirety of their career, that we're very clear that it's not something, career leadership is not something that you start thinking about when you're just a junior or senior. We try to bring in conversations about the importance of being in leadership conversations, the importance of cultivating communities of support, of supporting each other when you're in leadership positions right from day one on campus. And we found that to be crucial in sending the right kind of message to our students.
So that kind of speaks to the next point about how we can then serve women within, from day one on campus and then throughout their life as a college student, undergraduate or graduate, and then into the workplace as well. And we really feel that networking and mentoring has a big part of that. So in terms of women in networking, what we see most often is that women tend to form small, tight-knit communities where they have a real good support system there. And there can be some positives and negatives to that type of networking. On the negative side of things, men are more likely to have a wide net of contacts and are more likely to be able to get out there and, shake hands and be, really forceful and transactional about their networking, which has some positives and negatives as well. But for women specifically, they might not have that wide breadth of contacts within their network. However, on the positive side of things, we see that 77% of the highest achieving women in a study done by Northwestern show that having strong ties within an inner circle really lends a really strong support system, and they're more likely to be promoted. In fact, 3 times more likely to get a better job than women who don't have that type of small knit support system. Additionally, sorry, Christine. No, please.
No, it's interesting that we ran a lot of, one of the things I was working on this semester was running career panels, and without being prompted, almost to a woman, the various members of the panel talked about the significant mentors, both male and female, but this idea of having a couple of different mentors, or some people refer to as having a board of advisors, but that idea that you've got 2 or 3, maybe a few more key people that you turn to for advice, both professional and personal, was really interesting. And students, I think, were really, really keen in on that and sort of understanding mentoring sort of at a different level than they had been thinking of it.
Sure.
Great. And onto that topic of mentorship, we see some great stats here around how mentorship has an impact on women, specifically around the likelihood of earning a promotion when they participate in the mentorship program. It's 5 times. At UMass Amherst, Niladja Gupta described it as a social vaccine. Being able to really kind of help women have a sounding board especially in fields like STEM or engineering, where retention rates for women are pretty poor. So being able to have a mentor and that tight-knit community acts as a social vaccine for those types of industries where women might not be the majority. Funny enough, though, we find that on LinkedIn, in a LinkedIn study, only 1 in 5 women responded that they've never had a mentor. So there's a little bit of an imperative here to make sure that we are providing mentorship opportunities for women as they continue on throughout their college experience and then into their alumni experience as well. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to AJ and Christine to talk a little bit about the initiatives at Barnard with their Beyond Barnard program.
Thanks, Matt. So we're excited to talk specifically about mentoring today, but what we thought we'd do just to start off is to give you a kind of overview of what Beyond Barnard is. It's an initiative that started about a year and a half ago, and its mission is to really provide career support across a variety of areas for all of our students and our alumni as well, our entire community of about 35,000 alumni globally. Thanks, Matt. So to give you an overview of Barnard College, we're located in New York City on the very, very Upper West Side. I like to call it the Catskills of Manhattan because we're so far north. You can't go too much farther without getting into the water. We're a highly selective institution. Actually, this year we have accepted only about 11% of our overall applicants, an enormous bump of applicants in the last couple of years, which demonstrates that the draw to a community that really advances and supports women has been even stronger in the last, let's say, 5 years. We have about 2,600 undergraduate women and a distinctive relationship with Columbia University. So students at Barnard take classes at Columbia, they get a Columbia University degree. We were very proud last year because more students from Columbia took classes at Barnard than Barnard students took classes at Barnard, demonstrating that there's a big pull to what we call the west side of Broadway for students to be taking class here at the Women's College environment. Like I said, we have about 35,000 global alumni. And right now, a lot of the conversations on campus, especially around diversity, equity, and inclusion, have been centered on commitment to advancing social mobility. And we think that mentorship is really essential in the task of advancing particularly first-generation low-income students who might come to campus without the kind of social and cultural capital of some of their peers from elite high schools across the country. Mentoring can be really a vaccine, a magic pill, or really just a really good practice for advancing them into the middle class, bringing them to a different place than their families have been previously. In terms of Beyond Barnard, we are what we like to think is a distinctively integrated model of career support. We combine everything related to jobs and careers, so that's student jobs on campus and off campus, anything supported by federal work study or Barnard College financial aid, but then also career exploration and internship support, along with advising on competitive national and international fellowships and everything related to graduate and professional school. So by creating this kind of one-stop shop for students, we're really trying to help them understand that their transferable skills have a lot of different avenues for growth across their career as an undergraduate and then as alumni afterwards. We're about 20 staff, we're at 17 right now, and we are bursting at the seams. We do about 3,500 individual advising engagements, which on a campus of 2,600 is kind of eye-popping for us. We're constantly busy. And like I said a lot earlier, about 20% of that advising is with alumni. Mentoring has been a great way to kind of diffuse the responsibility to connect with this distinctively demanding generation of students one-on-one. So the capacity to help students into one-on-one relationships with mentors is one way that we can satisfy this very deep hunger for really individually tailored relationships for our students and for our alumni. We spend about $1.5 million each year on just internship and research stipends. And I'll hand it over to Christine in a second to talk about the specific details of our mentoring operation. But this year, our mentoring program enters its 10th year. And we're excited at the occasion because it's also an opportunity for us to really rethink how we've designed our mentoring programs and to roll them into virtual spaces that will allow more of our increasingly global alumni network to engage with campus.
Sorry. So the longest part of, so one basic premise of the mentoring program is exploring interests. And so especially in the one-on-one mentoring, we do the best we can. It's not always a perfect fit to match students who are interested in a particular field with mentors in a particular field. So that's one of the key things. And we also, so it's across fields and then across stages of career. And so our mentoring cohort this year had graduates as recent as just a year or two out, as well as a couple of mentors who were retired or semi-retired, and everything in between. And what's interesting is the mentors, I sort of, at our opening mentoring brunch, which we have every September, I had several people come up to me and saying, are you sure I'm not too young, too new in the field to be a mentor? And then others who are like, it's sort of more the self-deprecating humor. I've been in this forever. Do I really have anything of value? And the answer to both was yes, absolutely. And so, you know, we set up those in some parts of our mentoring program, that one-on-one, but also try and give opportunities at things like the brunch and the closing ceremony and a couple of other workshops where they can mix. So they're not just having access to their one-on-one mentor, but also to the mentoring cohort overall. Yeah, and I think that some of the other key points of mentoring by women for women is this idea that it goes beyond career and professional support, but there's that personal perspective. So we just had our closing event a couple weeks ago and asked both mentors and mentees to define mentoring, and it was interesting. It sort of struck us that a lot of the students talked about the personal relationship and that personal perspective that was not a professor, not an advisor, not a parent, but a professional woman, maybe a little older, maybe a lot older, getting that fresh perspective.
And I would say just...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So just in terms of the intentional program structure around the mentoring program, we try to focus on building enrichment programs that emphasize some of the most important themes for women in the workplace across the lifetime of their careers. And so this year we focused on both speed interviewing, so giving our students the opportunity to meet multiple mentors and give them their pitch about how they're positioning themselves as liberal arts students for diverse careers. And then also negotiation. So back to your data on how to narrow the wage gap, we think that it's incredibly important for students to learn very early on that negotiation is just something that you should be doing to advocate for your own value and to really start from a very, very young age, understanding that negotiations are not necessarily tough or awkward conversations, but that they are essential to one's capacity to ensure that they're getting what they're worth at work. We've partnered with a faculty member at the Columbia Business School, Dan Ames, who built a platform called Negotiable, which is fantastic, and we really highly recommend it. And it's essentially based on his research and negotiation that shows that women might negotiate less than men, but once they do decide to participate in negotiation, they're just as successful as their male counterparts in achieving equitable wages. And so we think that's a great argument for us. We love collaborating with faculty where possible. It's a great argument for both students and alumni that negotiation is something that is really valuable across the lifetime of a career. Last thing I'll say here, and this is something that I think Christine is really good at bringing home because we have such a really diverse group of mentors, and we'll talk about that in a second. But for our students, and I imagine for some of the other listeners today, it's really essential that we create as broad a field of mentors as possible to demonstrate that you can really take a liberal arts education in lots of different directions. So back to the slide about ROI for a liberal arts degree, if you can credibly say to a student that it's not that their major doesn't matter, it's just that their major won't dictate the entire arc of their career. And then you introduce them to a room of 100 women who maybe majored in art history but are running banks, or who majored in economics but are leading nonprofit organizations. It makes that argument so much more credible to present students with lots of different options in the form of really successful alumni. So that's really important to us.
That was actually one of the questions I was going to ask here is how are you finding that students, with their various majors are connecting with women of various industry expertise or function expertise, and what exactly is that kind of shared value that they're connecting over, given that they be interested?
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, to reiterate what AJ said, it's just the power of having somebody who's actually in their career, successful in their career, saying, I majored in this, I love majoring in this, I use this aspect of it, but I'm in a career that would not necessarily be predicted, but then, we have others, there's definitely correlation between what they studied and what they're doing professionally, and then sometimes not. And then even people who, for instance, in the STEM fields, who were science and math majors and are using that every day, will talk about what else they took as part of the liberal arts degree and how that helps them. We had a mentor who works at Google, who was an poli-sci major, and she worked here as a writing fellow, which is a peer writing thing. And she was sharing with her mentee that what her manager, she's working as a project manager at Google, and he said the reason he picked her for the job was because she wrote such great emails, and how important that communication skill was. And she was talking in general about how being a writing fellow had really helped her hone those communication skills and was really paying off in ways that she had not anticipated at the time that she became a writing fellow. So.
Yeah, I would say for those of you who are building mentoring programs or maybe have mentoring programs, you might know that one of the big challenges is that a student expects that their mentor has to match their major. Yeah. And it's great to bring in a real diverse group of alumni and then make the argument to students that, no, you can be an econ major and your mentor might be an art historian. And the benefit for you here is not that just that you have a shared affinity with Barnard, but you can talk to each other and practice that skill of translating what you're doing so that it resonates with her. And that capacity to translate what you're doing in the classroom for multiple audiences is essential. We find that to be one of the key skills that students who are successful in their job search or their graduate careers, they have that ability to translate the value of their liberal arts degree.
Yeah, it's one of the things we've actually been focusing a lot here too with some of the research we've been looking at is, the soft skills gap. You talk about liberal arts majors and talk about the critical thinking, the communication, and some of the things that, we might hear over and over again when it comes to the value of a liberal arts degree, but it's really put into practice in these networking and mentorship relationships so that students get the feel of what it's like to go through that process before they hit the ground running in a position.
That's right.
Great. And the other question that came in here was around young alumni. You mentioned being able to have those younger alumni come who feel like they don't have a ton to offer. And there's two questions on that. First, are those young alumni coming back as well for their own personal need? Maybe they have a specific thing they're looking to accomplish out of their own professional development through the mentoring program. And then second, are the students themselves finding those types of relationships more or less impactful than with, say, an experienced alum?
Well, yeah, I think definitely the young alumni who volunteer to be mentors and are coming back are, they're definitely motivated by wanting to give back and wanting to stay connected to the college and stay connected to the students. But I do think a lot of them find it professionally rewarding, and we've been talking to the students about that. Even talking about we did a workshop for juniors, and AJ was talking about how adopting a first year is so helpful to you to realize how much you know about college in the 2 years you've been here. And so that's one of the things that I think a lot of our young alumni are expressing, is that they don't realize how much they've learned in the year or 2 or 3 since they've been out of Barnard. And I think it adds to that confidence of, yeah, I actually know a lot. And then also, I think we all know that whenever you have to stop and think about what you've been doing and think about what your advice is and articulate that, it helps you. And so we've had a number of mentors express that as well, that it helps. They enjoy helping the students, but it also helps them. And sometimes even identify what their next step might want to be, or do they want to move to something different. So
they're still thinking about how to tell their own story, and this is a great way to practice it.
Totally. Yeah,
absolutely.
What was there was another, I can't speak, we don't really have enough data yet to say, are the mentors with younger alumni more satisfied? We've done a fair amount of informal feedback. The formal feedback we've gotten pretty low numbers, pretty low responses. That's something we are hoping actually the move to PeopleGrove is going to help us with better tracking data, metrics. Better tracking.
So. Great. So one more poll question here, just to get a sense of how many types of mentoring programs exist at your institution currently. These could be, like peer-to-peer, faculty and staff programs, advising programs. Let's just get a quick sense of the types of mentorship programs, types of different forms of mentorship programs are out there amongst our attendees today. So I'm going to launch the poll again here. Probably another 20 seconds. Got about half the vote in. All right, stopping in now. So as we share the results here, we'll see that it's pretty centralized here towards, some more specific types. 1 to 2, 3 to 4 are the top answers here. So good to see. It's always good to kind of strategize and hone in on a particular type of program that is most effective. I'll hide the results here and go back to our slides and talk about a little bit of the types of mentorship that are happening with Beyond Barnard.
So I would say I'm glad to see that most of you are on the kind of lower scale, because one of the things that we realized when we started taking a hard look at mentoring engagements when we relaunched as Beyond Barnard last January was that we essentially had 3 different programs. So what you see on the slide right now, the New York Network, Mentors in Residence, and Schvidler Fellows, were all essentially billed as 3 different programs. And one of the things that we did right away was kind of change the brand and the messaging about what mentoring is at Barnard, so that there's now one mentoring program with multiple different engagement options for both students and alumni. Clarity in communicating the benefit of mentoring often has to do with a product mix, if you will, to use a kind of horrible, I hate using like business school lingo in higher ed context for some reason, but it truly was a product mix problem for us. And making it much easier for both students and alumni to opt into the kind of mentoring that was most interesting to them, while having all of the options seem like they were in relatively one place, made it a lot easier to attract much bigger cohorts. And I don't think I'm speaking out of school when I say this. We had, and Christine will talk about the different options in a moment, the largest cohorts of participation in what is now the New York Network, Mentors in Residence, and Schvidler Fellows this year. And we can talk about the virtual mentoring and Mentors on Call. We're both in their pilot stages this year, but we think that, again, bringing all of these program options under one roof made it much easier for people to put up their hand and say, yes, I'd like to opt into that, whether they were mentors or mentees.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so, it's always hard when you switch language and branding. We have people who've been mentoring in one form or another for many years who are still calling everything the old names, but it's all fine. So to go over them briefly, as the ones that existed pre-Beyond Barnard, the New York Network is, what maybe many people think of as a typical sort of classic mentoring program. We had students would apply and alumni applied/volunteered and had to fill out, some information about what, their field and what they could offer, and students had to fill out what they're interested in, and then we matched them together for a one-on-one, primarily in-person, year-long, academic year-long relationship. And one of the reasons we've been able to do it in a robust fashion for the last 10 years is because we're in New York City, so many of our alumni are in the area. I think the figure is 50% of our alumni live within 50 miles of New York City. So we've always been able to do a fair amount of that one-on-one. It doesn't mean they always meet in person, but they're able to meet. We have them meet together on campus in September and then get together several times for group events, and then they're meeting individually as well. Mentors in Residence, again, also we greatly expanded this year the numbers. This had existed for a number of years before, but this year we were able to really focus on bringing in alumni. This basically, they would come in mostly on Fridays, anywhere from 3 hours to 5 hours. So it's a one-time stint. They would come into the office and we allowed students to sign up, as many as 3 students per slot. So it became sort of this small group conversation, and that I would say has been an unqualified success. I mean, we got higher numbers for some people than others. We've learned a little bit about how to market and how to describe what the alumni does and why it might be of interest to students, but otherwise it was very, people really happy on all sides with that. Spidler Fellows has existed for 4 or 5 years under a couple of different names. This is a particular model of, we have a group of students apply to become Spidler Fellows. They have a brief orientation and then through the semester make 3 site visits to C-suite alumni. It's not always alumni, but women who are in high positions. And so again, for the alumni, it's a one-time, one-shot deal. But for the students, they're experiencing 3 different women in different industries. And that's interesting too, because they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to go to this one. It's not my industry, but the focus there is on leadership and on sort of career stories and, those key moments where decisions were made. So.
Do you mind if I just add a little color here too, is the latter 2 programs, Mentors in Residence and Spidler Fellows, we've had really successful partnerships with the Office of Alumni Relations and Development. And this could be key for some of you thinking about how do you justify the support for a new mentoring program, or how do you scale up an existing program. But essentially what happens is in the case of Mentors in Residence, after a full day of talking to incredible Barnard students, an alumna is dehydrated, but also really happy and really enthusiastic about her connection to the institution. That's when someone from the Office of Development comes in and has a conversation with them, maybe over coffee or lunch, about how they might be interested in engaging more deeply with Barnard College. And that's been a great partnership with development. In the case of the Spidler Fellows program, which really focuses on C-suite and presidential kinds of figures, real women's leaders, primarily in New York City, the funding for that program was provided entirely by a donor who had very specific ideas about the importance of exposing young women at Barnard to women in high levels of leadership. And that's been another really great collaboration. It facilitates conversations with, we've had some really excellent people. President of the Bronx Botanical Gardens for the first time is a woman. The outgoing president of the Natural Resources Defense Council is a Barnard alumna. Former partner at a major law firm in New York City and a former president of the American Bar Association, a woman of color and alumna of Barnard.
And my personal favorite title, the CDO of Colgate, which is the Chief Dental Officer.
Yeah.
Colgate Palmolive. She was awesome. The students loved her.
I steered clear of that. I just can't do dentists. But the point is that this is an incredibly diverse set of women's leaders and provided a very different kind of engagement. But the group style of engagement in mentoring contexts helps lower the barrier to entry for students. They can be very anxious about having an individual relationship with a high-level person. These programs help to de-stress. It's a lot more like class, a lot more like exchange.
From a logistical perspective, how many Spidler Fellows are there per semester?
About 20?
Yeah, we aim for 20. We accept about maybe 24, 25. There's a little bit of attrition. They swear they'll be able to make all the sessions, and then what happens. So, but yeah, it's we aim. The goal is to have 18 to 20. So it's ends up being sort of seminar style, which is really helpful. But we encourage them to prepare questions ahead of time. And then one thing I noticed is there was always that group of students who stayed after to have that one-on-one conversation with the leader. It was really interesting.
So this year, the last 2 very quickly, and then we'd love to start talking about what we're doing in 2019-20. Mentors on Call was in response to alumni and parents actually, who expressed an interest in providing kind of one-off answers to questions that students might have about their career field. This was a great way to get a lot of alumni engaged, and we didn't use all of them, and it's important in these mentoring engagements to really manage expectations of your alumni and ensure that if they really have energy to engage, that you find out a way to make sure that they feel like you're taking advantage of that energy. It's really key to keep, especially the higher up you go, typically in terms of the career field, the higher the expectation of that energy really being tapped into. The last part is virtual mentoring, which we piloted this year. And for those of you who might be considering adopting a platform to help manage your virtual mentoring programs like PeopleGrove, piloting and proving that we had the interest among both students and alumni to participate in remote mentoring mediated by video chat was essential to us building a case with the dean, the provost, and alumni relations to help build this kind of consortium of funding partners on campus to make the platform actually happen. So we were really pleased with the result. We had 70 alumni and student pairs in the very first year of this as an opportunity. And it helped demonstrate that we were being responsive to alumni feedback from around the world that, hey, we want to be engaged too. New York has only gotten 50% of the people. Why are they getting 100% of the love? So we're trying to really make sure that people around the world feel like they have an entry point, which I think brings us up to our goals for 2019-20 when it comes to how we're going to use PeopleGrove. And I'm still not sure how to apply this, so such a Luddite. So these are our kind of areas of focus and maybe areas for discussion for all of us with the time that remains. We find that it's going to be important to continue to promote inclusivity, especially, and ensuring that the diversity of students who opt into mentoring opportunities are as diverse and representative as the entire student population. So especially with respect to first-generation low-income students, students who come from underrepresented minority backgrounds, there often isn't an inbuilt culture of seeking mentorship, and there may even be a higher level of intimidation factor about putting one's hand up and saying, yes, I deserve a mentor. And so what we're trying to do is be a lot more intentional in our communication to first-generation students, to particular student groups that are formed around cultural, racial, or ethnic identity, and really use discussion and information to promote awareness that mentoring at Barnard is just something that you do. So we're trying to kind of make it part of the cultural water. In terms of broadening industry groups, we are up to our eyeballs in asset managers. We can staff an entire mentoring program with really motivated and really awesome alumni who are in financial services. But what we really want to make sure we're doing is reflecting the diversity of student interests when it comes to career goals, bringing in more people from entertainment, music, journalism, the arts generally, nonprofits, a lot of dance, and increasingly scientists, as 35% of Barnard students are now science majors. So we'll use PeopleGrove to just basically try to cast a broader net with alumni and make it easier for them to come in while tailoring messages to alumni populations about the importance of having diverse industries. Do you want to talk about metrics at all?
Well, yeah, we're looking forward to the metrics.
Just generally, right?
Being able to back up the anecdotal, information we're getting with hard numbers, which go over really well in higher education and the world in general. And then I just wanted to say that I think one of the things that's so appealing about using PeopleGrove is that alumni being able to control and how much they have to give. And so, we do find in the STEM fields, as we had these various mentoring events over the years, that the doctors were always late and they were always super apologetic. They made it, which was great, but they were often coming from super long days or super intense things. I mean, not that other careers aren't intense, but just as an example. And so the fact that we'll now be able, through the virtual mentoring and through the PeopleGrove platform, have a little bit more control of, you can just give a little, or you can control how much access you have, is really an important part of this.
So how are you? Sorry, go ahead. Matt, do you have a question there?
Well, the question there was just going to be about how you were setting those goals. So as you look at some of those metrics that the platform's able to provide, you spoke a little bit about how in the alumni pairs in your soft launch was deemed a success. What kind of things are you looking at that is helping you set those as goals?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I always like to say about our shop that we're not data driven, but we like to be data informed. We're not, we're not quantitative. We're not trying to measure just heads, right? Like we're not trying to determine program outcomes just by who shows up. We're really trying to ensure that when we look at our advising, for example, with 3,500 advising appointments across the entire academic year, we reach about 55 to 60% of our student body. We want to make sure that we're also reaching a similar percentage of the total number of first-generation students on campus. And that's just baseline, because perhaps it's the case that we need to reach them more deeply in order to make sure that they're at the same level. So that's equity as opposed to just, counting numbers by numbers. Same with our mentoring programs. We think that mentoring should be distributed proportionally across our student body, and that the number of folks from different communities that are taking advantage of mentoring opportunities is really reflective of the diversity across lots of different ways to measure diversity of our Barnard students. I think we're excited to measure satisfaction. We're excited to measure how people feel We hear a lot from folks who leave our events, gee, I just feel more confident leaving us. I was really anxious before, and I'm really happy I came to this career insights panel or this mentoring event, because I just feel empowered. And so we want to figure out how to take those really interesting anecdotes, collect some qualitative information about the impact of these events when it comes to being future-oriented and optimistic, but then also to translate that into some just satisfaction metrics. So we'll start there and we'll see where we go.
And so as we hit the last slide here, I'm looking through some of the questions here, and I think we might have covered everything unless there are any last minute questions here. We still have about 9 minutes left in the hour. So if anyone has any additional questions for AJ and Christine, happy to field those now. You'll notice that we actually have Alexa. I should acknowledge that Alexa was not able to join us today, so we really appreciate Christine being able to come and share her experience as well. And Christine, would it be okay if we shared your contact information as well?
Absolutely.
Great.
We're really happy to talk to you all. Questions about mentoring, questions about the provision of just career development support in a different kind of integrated model. We'd love to hear if you're doing the exact same things we are. We'd love to hear that. But we're really always happy to help as long as it's advancing the needs of students. We're psyched. We're psyched about it. And alumni too.
Yeah.
We love alumni, especially Christine.
Well, I don't see any other questions. Oh, we have one more. Any chance you guys are going to come to our PeopleGrove Summit this year?
I mean, is it in San Francisco in winter? Then yes, we'll be there.
San Francisco in winter. It's July 16th and 17th. I'll actually click over to our next slide here so we can take a look at some of the things that are coming soon from us. We have a couple resources that we have just launched. A new white paper about alumni career services called Learning and Earning. As well as the Promise for Mentorship for Women, again, written by our own Anna Wessendorf. So we're really excited to be able to share that with you all. We're also hitting the road this year with PeopleGrove. We are going to do a series of 18 success summits across the country this summer. And we're really excited to get out there and meet everyone on various campuses across the country and learn a lot about what's going on with mentorship and networking at your community. So please visit our Summer Summit site here, summersummits.peoplegrove.com, to learn more, and hopefully there's one in your region. If not, feel free to reach out to us at innovators@peoplegrove.com for suggest a new location. We also have our June webinar coming up, June 19th, and we're going to tap one of our internal resources here. Our Director of Product, Tori Funkhauser, is going to speak about product philosophy when it comes to networking and mentorship. So a little bit of a high-level look at how we think about the work that we do here with our software platform. And then finally, that PeopleGrove conference, July 16th and 17th. Really excited to share that Brandon Bastide of Kaplan University Partners is going to be our keynote speaker. If you haven't seen any of his recent work, he's been published in Forbes, on Forbes.com. Really recommend checking out some of the work that he's done and some of the thought leadership coming out of Kaplan University Partners. It's really fascinating and informative when it comes to some of these human capital campaigns, as he describes. So highly recommend taking a look at that. I'm going to flip back to the contact information here just to finish up. But I hope everyone learned a lot today and got a lot out of the webinar. I want to thank AJ and Christine for their time today. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and your knowledge here. And we really look forward to continuing to learn more about the initiatives at Beyond Barnard.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Matt. It was great.
Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.